What is up, everybody? It's us. It's Rich and Ray. This is Sharp Angles Podcast. It's Thursday. It's Thursday, the first Thursday of NFL season. Rich, we're recording this on Thursday morning. If you're not watching us live, if you're listening to the podcast feed, we appreciate that. By the way, if you are watching us live, you can subscribe to the podcast. You'll get all of this. You get a bunch of content that we have coming up. Warren Sharp's going to be doing some shows for us and part of the Sharp Angles podcast. Lots of stuff coming up, but that's not why we're here. We are here to talk about fantasy football. We're here to talk about week one of the fantasy football season. And obviously, if I'm talking about week one, if I'm talking about fantasy football, it is with the Swami of Konami himself, Mr. Rich Hribar. How excited are you about our kickoff this evening?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I'm excited. The games look good. I mean, we have a Friday game too, so it's not even just a Thursday night opener that we've
Yeah, I
had,
know.
for, the past decade plus. But now we're getting a Friday game as well, so a Friday evening game. The games look good. I mean, hopefully these are all good matchups. I mean, you never know what we're gonna get. Since the reduction of preseason games. I mean, these week one games have let down the last 2 years. Like it's been a struggle for offenses out of the gate. So hopefully we do see some touchdowns scored this weekend.
We're going to be doing this every single Thursday morning, 11:30 Eastern. You can catch us live on Twitter. You can catch us live on YouTube. Head over to YouTube, search Warren Sharp. You will find the Sharp Football Analysis YouTube account. Subscribe. You'll get notifications. When we go live over there. There's lots of places over to find us. You can find us in your podcast feed. Search for Sharp Angles. Rate and review. Subscribe. We appreciate all of that. Also, this week, we have a lot of deals going on at the site, getting ready for the season. You can get 25% off any season-long package using promo code TAKE25. An even better deal, though, is you can get 77% off all weekly subscriptions using promo code WEEK1, and that's one spelled out, WEEKONE. You can use that and get 77% off all weekly subs. That means you can get access to Warren Sharp's betting recommendations. That means you get access to Rich Hribar's worksheet previews, in which he previews every single game, every single week, every single notable fantasy player Rich Hribar is going to write about every single week. And you're going to get those early in the week. Those are going to be all posted by the end of the day on Wednesday, along with Rich's rankings. We have DFS information there, DFS picks as well from Rich. A ton available if you're a fantasy football person as part of our subs, and you can get part of the weekly subscription for 77% off for this first week using promo code WEEK1. Check that out. All right, let's get to it. Let's get to real or fake. And we don't have we're waiting. We're going to wait for the image. We're just going to appreciate. Is that us? It's a skinnier version of me and a chubbier version of Rich. But yes, that is in fact Rich and Ray. And they've given me, and I've always appreciated that graphic because they've given me more of a height advantage than I think I have. And so I've always appreciated that part of it as well. But there's not a ton to talk about here with real or fake this week. Obviously, we're not coming off performances, but I do think it's interesting to think about CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Aiyuk, and Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase, especially because as we're recording this, unless I've missed some big breaking news, we have not seen a contract come through. But we had late contracts there for Lamb and Aiyuk. We've had more limited practices throughout all of training camp, preseason, things like that. And so I guess the question is, all of these guys are elite receivers. Lamb and Chase specifically are elite fantasy receivers. Aiyuk would be if he just got more targets, but unfortunately that's the way the 49ers offense works. And so as we look at all three of these guys, like, what's your worry level? How worried are we about these three guys heading into week one, do you think?
I think I actually have these guys probably a little bit lower in week one than maybe, whatever ECR you use is for consensus rankings, just because of the spots they're in. I don't think necessarily the ramp up, because it's tough to gauge, right? Like it's tough for me to place, like, to say like, all right, well, how many snaps are these guys going to play? Like, how fully are they ready to go? Because I don't know that at all. But I do think that each one of them has some kind of pulling threads at kind of their matchups, maybe where we don't get kind of a ceiling run out. Like Bengals is like pretty easy, right? Like they just might not have to throw very much in that game. I mean, they're 8.5-point home favorites right now against what we believe is going to be the worst team in the NFL. So is there just a chance where, Chase does run into some limitations and he just doesn't have like that full run out? of like the Bengals, having to throw the football. So that's kind of like the one thing for Chase. Lamb is in a spot where you got the Browns, who were awesome against, wide receivers last year. And, I'm expecting Dak to be worse, basically. Lamb's going to be fine. I'm going to start him. He's going to get all these targets like while he's on the field. There's really no target threat. They didn't add anybody. But when you look at Dak Prescott against teams that were in the top 10 in passing points allowed last year, he was awful in all those games. He's the QB 17 or worse in all 4 of those games last year. So I'm expecting it to be kind of a downer game for Dak and Dak's context, so if I did have Dak, I probably would stream for Dak, to be honest. There's a number of guys I think in that back end QB1 range I would play over Dak, guys like Jared Goff, maybe even if you had like a Baker Mayfield, right? Like I would potentially play Baker Mayfield over.
Matthew Stafford's definitely on that list. We'll talk about him soon.
That group of guys back there. So that's why I'm dinging Lamb a little bit. And then Aiyuk, again, just runs into this matchup where I think he gets the worst of this individual matchup. He does not get kind of those. Well, when him and Debo play together, he just doesn't get as many free squares. He only averages 7 targets per game, and he's going to be running routes against where the New York Jets have been awesome, literally the past 2 years, right? And, Robert Saleh obviously has familiarity with this offense. That's an intriguing game on Monday night. But obviously he has familiarity with this offense. But the Jets have just absolutely nuked wide receivers on vertical throws the past 2 years. And when you look at the style of defense they play a lot of cover 4, a lot of cover 6. And like that has always been a signal for Debo Samuel. So I just think it signals more of a Debo game than an Aiyuk game on Monday night. So those are the reasons I have those guys probably a little lower than where their initial ADP was. Am I benching any of those 3? Not Lamb, not Chase if he plays. Aiyuk, maybe there's some alternatives because I just don't think the volume and I think the matchup is potentially that poor that it depends on who you have.
If you're Jackson Graham and you have those 5 wide receivers, then you could probably bench Aiyuk.
Correct.
If you have Rice Pickens,
you play Rashee Rice and Drake London. Correct. I think like where the cutoff is like for Aiyuk, would I play Calvin Ridley over Brandon Aiyuk, right? Because you might have got Calvin Ridley as your wide receiver 4 as a heavy wide receiver drafter. I think I would play Calvin Ridley this week too. Over him. Maybe Chris Godwin, right? Like as another guy, like if you've got as your wide receiver 4, your wide receiver 5, I would lean maybe towards a guy like Chris Godwin. Maybe a Jaxon, Smith-Njigba. Those are guys I would at least be in consideration for you. I just think that this lines up for one of those volatile weeks for him.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like even Calvin Ridley has a great matchup either. Going to Chicago, but it's a that's an interesting idea there with Aiyuk. Your answer to this question then is yes, but it's yes because like they're just all happen to find themselves in bad situations. It really is an interesting thing that all 3 of these guys are finding themselves in bad situations, especially if next week we talk about, and maybe they all 3 have, maybe they all, all 3 have slightly down weeks. A slightly down week for CeeDee Lamb is probably still like 7 catches in this offense, right? But if we're talking about they all have slightly down weeks, then we're going to hear a lot of chatter early next week about, did the holdout affect him? But really, it's just kind of one of those situations of this isn't a good spot really for any of them.
Lamb only went over those 4 games I mentioned with Dak. Lamb only went over 53 yards in one of those games. So you're probably looking at like a PPR game for him, or maybe you just hope he gets a touchdown too. Like that's the other out, is you just get in the box.
Yeah, and I mean it's Browns at home. I mean, and we'll see if those home and road splits continue. But Browns defense at home was it was good everywhere, but it was a different beast last year. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of where we go from there. Ryan and I actually were talking last week about that Clemson and Georgia game. And my only question about Clemson, Georgia was how does Clemson score points? That's exactly where I am with the Patriots at this point. Like, how are they scoring points? Like, I don't even know how this is going to happen. And it's not like the Bengals defense is even particularly good. Nobody is particularly excited about this Bengal defense, but how are they scoring points? Which means, by the way, that now that I've asked that question, that the Patriots will somehow score 30. That is what we're going to look at. Jacoby Brissett QB1 game. That's incoming. Let's move on to talk about a few of these games. Friday night, as you mentioned it, in Brazil. The Eagles and Packers. The Eagles. The good news about the Eagles and Packers is that they will be in their hotel rooms on Thursday night to watch the Chiefs and the Ravens, because apparently they're too scared to leave their hotel rooms after the meetings that they had with the NFL. So maybe they're listening to this now. I hope you're doing well, Eagles and Packers players. Lots of interesting things happening here. Again, these two teams also have a lot of moving parts on offense. The Eagles specifically, but even the Packers, though, that the big change is Josh Jacobs, who oddly, and we'll talk about in a second, is probably the player you feel most comfortable about amongst everybody in this game based on what his role is going to be, at least. The Packers receivers, I mean, everybody's back, but we don't know what that rotation is going to be. There's just a lot of interesting things happening in this game, and I think that Packers receiver rotation is really an interesting place to start, both because we don't know what that's going to look like with Watson healthy. And Watson is healthy, and maybe that hamstring thing finally worked out. He was able to practice all training camp. For this podcast, it'd be very good if Watson stays healthy. And so we're sending nothing but prayers to his hamstring. But we also have the Eagles secondary, who was, which was really bad last year, was much better the year before. They've made changes. Are they actually good in the secondary? There's a ton of questions if we have to talking about the Packers passing game with what we think is going to happen here.
Yeah, 100%. And that's one of the reasons why I was drafting a lot of Packers guys in best ball with stacks. And then when it came to draft season long leagues, I was finding myself like shying away from them at ADP versus other guys, because it's going to be like largely this conundrum every week, right? Like, you feel good about Jordan Love in this spot. I feel pretty good about Jordan Love in this game on Friday.
Sure.
But trying to diagnose exactly how they're going to deploy these wide receivers, because they're going to want to keep Christian Watson fresh too. I don't think that like Christian Watson's a guy that they're like intending to run out there as much as they do Romeo Doubs, right? Like Romeo Doubs, I've always called him Green Bay Gabe Davis, because like he's just going to play more than we want. He's active in the run game. He's active in the red zone. Like, he does things the coaching staff likes more than fantasy players. He's a thorn in our side, because you never feel good about playing Romeo Doubs, because you have to play the game of like, does he score a touchdown or not? That's like the game with Romeo Doubs.
That's the game. Yep.
And then you have Jaden Reed, who just didn't play in 2 wide receiver sets last year. He runs into a spot where, we targeted, the Eagles in the middle of the field last year. Is that going to be something we do this year? But he's probably not going to play in 2 wide receiver sets. And then you have Dontavian Wicks, who played so well as the season progressed that I don't think he's going to fully just be relegated. I think he's going to be part of a rotation, probably with Watson as part of like to keep Watson fresh, but maybe it is with Dobbs, a little bit. So I think Dontavian Wicks played too well to completely put back in the bottle, is what I'm saying. I think he's going to get snaps. How many does he get though? Right? Like, we don't know. Yeah. So you're talking about like potentially the guy that's 4th on the team in snaps, and like, are you going to start him? Like, and it sucks because of the spot, right? And then that trickles to the tight ends, because I've wrote about it at nauseum all year. Like, you want a tight end that could threaten to be the number 2 target on his offense or better. And how do you get there with Luke Musgrave, right? Like, how do you get there? There was only 2 games last year where a Packers tight end had a 20% target share in a game. Jordan Love just didn't target tight ends, because you know why? The receivers were good. So I threw the ball to the wide receivers. So it's just really tough. I mean, I think the matchup's good. I think in single game DFS, I do want to play some of the Packers guys, right? Like, I do want to take shots on Watson, especially in these love stacks, because I think Watson is the best player, right? Like, they just don't make 6'3" guys that run like Christian Watson. And anytime we've seen Christian Watson play, even last year when he was fully healthy, he was the number 1 wide receiver in that offense and was utilized that way in the red zone. So I do think there is still upside for him as well, especially if we get the snap share that we want, the route share. So I do want to take some shots in single game DFS, but it's one of these spots, 2 new defensive coordinators. The NFC has 10 different defensive coordinator changes. I was trying to keep up with it in the worksheet, and some guys, like you wrote, I thought Vic Fangio, we had been talking about for so long. I thought he was just there last year, and like you were like, no, he's new, and I'm like, yeah, that's right, he's just coming over too. But it's like there's so many coordinator changes, and we didn't really talk about that in the lead, but like, there's just so many of these games in week 1 where you're looking just for like an early reveal on some of this stuff. And like, what are some of these teams like actually setting out to do? Because the preseason just doesn't give us any information anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, like, if we extend that out, we continue that with Saquon Barkley in the Eagles backfield, because I mentioned this, I guess we talked about this last week. You wrote something very similar in the worksheet this week about how we're probably just overthinking this, because we're trying to ascribe how the Eagles have used DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Gainwell and Miles Sanders to how they might use Saquon Barkley, which no disrespect to any of those players. Saquon Barkley is on a different level than those three guys. A level, and by the way, they went out and got him, all of that kind of stuff. And we're trying to say, all right, well, this isn't going to work out for Saquon Barkley because this is how they use running back A, B, C, and D, right? And maybe we're just overthinking this, and maybe Saquon Barkley is just really good, but also there is that issue with the goal line stuff. There is an issue that Jalen Hurts is just going to have every carry from the 1 yard line. Barkley's never going to get any of those chances. Even in a good offense, if the Eagles offense bounces back and is very good, they were still okay last year, obviously, but if they bounce back and they're very good, elite, as they were a couple years ago, does Barkley finish with 7 or 8 touchdowns? And if that's the case, what's really, his fantasy upside? Does he get enough catches from Jalen Hurts, who's, the mobile quarterback? We don't like that for, backs who we want to get catches. And so all those questions with Barkley, and I don't know if we're going to get the full answer in this game. We also don't know what the Packers defense is going to be, because as you said, the new defensive coordinator, it was one that you would target last year with running backs. Is that going to continue? I would assume that Jeff Hafley, one of the things he was brought in to do is try to improve that run game. And again, it's just this theme that we have here. There are lots of questions. I'm in on Saquon Barkley. I've said it a lot of times. He's a good player and a good offense, find a good offensive line. I'm not going to overthink it, but we do still have some questions as we head here to this game for, specifically that running game with the Eagles.
I just can't. I want to see that first time the Eagles get to the 1 yard line, right? Like we just want to see it, right? Because do they say like instead of it's like, hey, let's show people we can pound it too, or like it's like I don't know, man. It's gonna be interesting. But I mean, this is for Barkley. I mean, like I said, it doesn't. I don't want to fully compare it to the Christian McCaffrey thing, but I remember when Christian McCaffrey got traded midseason to San Francisco, and like there was like public out like. There was at least a pocket of people, a contingency of people that were like, this is bad for his fantasy stock. And it's like, what? Like, and that's how I feel about this with Saquon. Like, he was in such bad teams and such bad offensive lines, and he's going to this team that we know is going to score points. We know even with losing Jason Kelce has a way better offensive line than Saquon Barkley's played with at any point in his career. And they're going to be just involved in more high-scoring games. Like, and we know there's talent there with Saquon, even if he's not the player that we thought he was coming out of Penn State. And is maybe a lesser version of what we saw in years 1 and 2 because of injuries, but this is still a good football player. And I'm confident to say that like he still is a good football player, and he's not a jag that we'll probably end up looking back on this and be like, yeah, there was a lot of overthinking it. I'm really excited though to see Kellen Moore. And again, what does Kellen Moore do? Because Brian Johnson did such a bad job last year with the Eagles. Like their offense was just so stale. They were in shotgun every snap. They never used pre-snap motion. They never used play action. It was just very boring. It was a vanilla offense.
Slow.
Yeah.
They got up to the line slow. Everything about it was slow and just predictable. And
then Hurts got injured midway through the season. And like, I'm sure that did impact some of the things that they did, but it was just a very vanilla offense. It was stale. And I'm excited to see what Kellen Moore brings to the table, what he can do. Cause there's just talent here. There's just a lot of talent. I mean, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, like you could do a lot of things. So we're going to see if Kellen Moore can pass this. I actually think Kellen Moore did a pretty decent job last year, given all the injuries the Chargers had. And he probably takes a lot more backlash than a lot of people say, probably give him. But I think as an offensive coordinator, there is upside here, especially with these players. I'm curious to see who gets the bump though, right? Because we know Kellen Moore likes to move his lead wide receiver around. And like, is that AJ Brown? Is it Devontae Smith? They both have like identical slot usage last year, but for their careers, Devontae Smith's been a better player than AJ Brown from the slot. And I mean, I'm sure if I know these numbers, that Kellen Moore, someone has fed him these numbers. So like, whether he treats them as whatever, he's just like, I don't care. I want to get AJ Brown the ball. Who cares about these? That remains to be seen, but I'm excited to see who kind of moves around.
Is a very fair opinion to have. If that's your opinion, that is a fine opinion to have, Kellen Moore. Oh, you want to get the guy who consistently creates big plays when you get him the ball? You want to get him the ball? That's fine. Fair enough.
The guy's not built like other humans. Like you want to give the ball to that guy?
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, I'm excited to see though, like how the usage for these wide receivers, like in terms of just not being stuck, like outside versus playing inside. I think both these guys are going to play inside more this year than they have to this point in their careers.
Yeah, I think so too. And then I mentioned this at the top, but I need to mention it again. If we're talking about just role and what we expect from a guy, like Josh Jacobs is the guy you feel so safe about with Josh Jacobs, because like the other Packers backs are hurt. Both Emmanuel Wilson and Marshawn Lloyd are on the injury report this week. Lloyd, I believe, did get in a limited practice yesterday, if I'm remembering correctly. AJ Dillon's obviously on injured reserve, season-ending injured reserve, and we had questions about what Josh Jacobs' role was going to be kind of earlier in the offseason. And I still think that as we move through the year, especially if he's the Josh Jacobs from last year, we will see that role start to maybe erode a little bit, and we'll see more Marshawn Lloyd as he gets healthy. We know how good, at least, you and I think Marshawn Lloyd is, and we'll see if that, translates to the NFL level. But right now, right here, going into week one, I mean, Josh Jacobs he looks like one of those locked in 3-down running backs. And you can't ask for more than that from Josh Jacobs. That's why you drafted him, was to hope that he's going to have the role that he's going to have or very likely to have in week one.
And think about where we left off with this Packers offense last year. At the end of the year when AJ Dillon was hurt, we saw Aaron Jones just rip off. He was the best running back in football those final 5 weeks. This Packers offense is another one. Like, I just believe it. Now, maybe week one, weird things happen. They're not sharp, whatever. But the back half of what we saw from the Packers offense, and you're just going to plug a guy in and say, all right, he's walking into the spot now where the depth chart has just been kind of, banged up the entire preseason. The run out is just going to signal in a game where the points probably need to be scored, that a huge workload. Like, yeah, this is as good of a run out, early season run out you could have hoped for if you drafted Josh Jacobs.
We have a couple questions here in the chat. I want to mention a few came in from Banks Thompson here. The one that really most interesting to me is start 2 at PPR Flex. He has 5: Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., Jalen Reed, Khalil Shakir, and Chase Brown. Obviously, I want to say start Chase Brown because I have driven all of you newcomers to the Chase Brown bandwagon, by the way. As Rich can confirm, I have been driving the Chase Brown bandwagon for roughly 16 months. And so I don't like all you newcomers showing up to my bandwagon. And I was in a FFPC reasonably high entry fee draft in which somebody took Chase Brown as the running back 19, which I didn't know there were people that like Chase Brown more than I like Chase Brown, but apparently that is the case.
Chase Brown was in that draft. He was in that. He was drafting a team.
Which, if that's the case, if he is the one who drafted himself, I suddenly feel great about all the Chase Brown that I have over Zach Moss. But those are the 2 of the 5 there. I think it's an interesting question. Where are you leaning there?
I want to play Worthy tonight. I won't lie, like because there's no Hollywood, right? Like, you're getting Worthy with no Hollywood. Like, you're gonna get the maximum usage early on in the year. Maybe he joins these Chiefs, because listen, the Chiefs rookies on these Thursday night games have dropped some hammers. Even Rashee Rice scored a touchdown last year on Thursday night in the debut, but guys like Kareem Hunt, Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's maybe best game of his career came in his first game. Everyone was like, oh, we made a mistake not drafting him, and then we know how the story
turns
goes.
out. Whatever, turns out.
But I mean, I think that if you drafted Worthy, this is like a spot where you would lean on wanting to play him. I am still a little concerned about Brian Thomas Jr. just because he didn't earn a lot of targets per route in college coming out, and he didn't earn a lot of targets per route in the preseason. And it's preseason, could be just nothing, but also, like, I'm a little concerned there, just about his target earning potential. I have no problem with trying to like Reed, Shakir, Chase Brown. I do want to play Worthy, though. I will say that I just want to play him if that's my group of guys. I want to take a shot on the upside, because I feel like if anyone has like a real chance of like catching like a long play or creating explosive, it's probably him.
I'd probably play Worthy and Reed, or if I need like more of like an upside, if I'm not predicted to win, I'd probably play Worthy and Chase Brown. That's where I'd lean.
Are you playing both Bengals guys this week? Because I mean, that's one-on-one where like we're looking for an early reveal, but they're huge home favorites. Like, it's a spot where we would want to just attack a backfield. So like, are you just putting both in your flex and you're saying I'm going to let kind of the opportunity shake out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have both on the same team,
right,
so
right.
But if I were
in general,
I'm interested in both of them. I think that if you're picking a week, I still think that ultimately how this works out, and this is going to be better for Zach Moss than it ultimately will be for Chase Brown if this is the case. But we're going to see Moss get a lot of those opportunities near the goal line that we saw Mixon get. That just seems to me that makes more sense for him to have those. And if that's the case in this kind of game against this defense, that I think we expected to be good before, obviously some, Christian Barrymore, hope he's doing well, had a bad situation with him. They trade away Matthew Judon. Like now we're considerably less worried about this Patriots defense. If you were interested at all in this team, it was like, oh, maybe their defense could carry them because it was actually legitimately good last year. We'll see kind of what moves on now. So yeah, so I would be interested in both of them. Hopefully we get enough volume from this running game because of it. And like I said, if you're taking Chase Brown, you're taking the upside that maybe he gets more carries than we think, maybe he gets more opportunities near the goal line than we think, and ultimately we just know he can break a long play. And so that would be the argument for Chase Brown. If he gets 12 touches, you have a reasonable chance that one of those is going to be a big play based on what we saw last year. Now, 5 other of those might be negative plays, but that's neither here nor there. We're not going to slander Chase Brown on this.
Man, I bet that longest rush. I bet the longest rush. So I'm counting on it.
What are our lists? So Chase Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs. When Nick Chubb comes back, hopefully we have to get back to our longest rush stands. Anybody else on our longest rush? I
think Kenneth Walker is in that boat too, right?
Walker.
Like Kenneth Walker is in that. We bet Kenneth Walker's longest run because he's a guy that will get you 3, 3, 3, and then 18.
Yeah, there you go. That's the way. This is the way. Longest rush on those types of backs. Speaking of Jahmyr Gibbs, let's talk a little bit here about the Rams at the Lions. Lions -3 with a 51 total. I believe this is the highest total of the week in this game. I'm in a weird spot with this game because I expect the Rams defense to be bad based on just, the issues they have in the secondary and kind of the issues that some of those people in the secondary. Although to be fair, there's a lot of talent in that secondary. If it clicks with them, with White and Williams and Cameron Curl was one of the best signings, I think, of the entire offseason. It kind of got lost in that kind of, there's such a large supply of safeties, but Cameron Curl's a pretty good safety. So if all of that hits, maybe they're fine. But that front, without Aaron Donald, with all the youth they have in that front, like now they don't have the linebacker was just traded to the Titans, whose name for some reason I've just forgotten. Yeah, Ernest Jones. I tried to call him Ernst and Young. Do you remember Ernst and Young, like the lawyer firm? I think they do like.
Is that a Texas lawyer firm, or is it like a?
No, I think they do like. I think they do like for like the NBA lottery. Maybe they do stuff.
Oh, okay. Because everyone has like that local like lawyer guy. That's literally how Better to Call Saul became a thing. Like that's just like on every billboard and like.
in where I live in Texas, it's Thomas J. Henry, who fun fact about Thomas J. Henry, I'm pretty sure his daughter was engaged to marry one of the One Direction kids. Like that's a fun fact about local legend Thomas J. Henry. That's how rich they are, that they're in the One Direction kind of crew. Anyway, but there are lots of questions obviously about this Rams defense, but I also thought that they were going to be bad last year and they were kind of fine because their young players hit. And it feels like speaking of Breaking Bad, they can't just keep getting away with this kind of situation. Like that's what it feels like. But, we like their young players. We like the 2 players they got at the top of this draft. So I don't know. I don't know what to do with this game because I think the Rams defense is probably going to be bad again. But also I thought that last year and they burned me. So I don't really know what we're looking at here.
Yeah, and then we still have kind of the reveal of like how healthy is Puka Nacua entering the year, right? Like we don't know.
Full practice yesterday.
The word is good. The word is good on him, but like what if there's any limitations there, right? So I mean, I'm with you. I think when I just look at this Lions team, right? And this Lions team, just all the moves they made, and they just look so good on paper. And we would have said it last year too, like the moves that they made to make that secondary better were positive, and then guys got hurt and it fell apart on them. But replacing, they lose Joan Jackson, they replace him with Kevin Zeitler, who's been one of the most reliable guards. So like the plug and play there. Then they, you trade for Carlton Davis, you add Terry and Arnold. So like it just looks good on paper. The Rams also were a team that were very opponent driven last year. They did hang around with some good teams, but they were 2-7 in games that they were an underdog. Like they didn't step up and win a lot of these games where like they weren't supposed to win. So I'm a little worried, but you kind of hit on with me. That was like, this team didn't get a lot of pressure with Aaron Donald. And like, we've got 2 rookies. And for me, everyone will always cite, and you've done the worksheet editing now for a year. And like I for years have been talking about this with Jared Goff. I don't care about the indoor outdoor stuff. There's some weather stuff I care about with Goff, but like he's the thing that you care about with Jared Goff is disruption. Can you move Jared Goff off his spot when the play structure and the surrounding talent works and the surrounding talent around Jared Goff is good? He's shown he can be an above average quarterback. And when the Rams didn't pressure Jared Goff last year when they played in the playoffs, he was 19 of 19 passing in that game for 13 yards per pass attempt. Like if they're not going to breathe
good?
on Jared Goff,
that seems good. Is that good? That seems good. I don't know if it's good.
It seems okay. So if they're not going to get pressure on him, like if we're coming into this game saying how are they going to pressure Jared Goff, like I think that's a big problem. That's just a huge problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an issue for them, and especially since we talk about this Lions. I feel like we wax poetic about this Lions offense and what they've been able to do with Goff and Ben Johnson since they've been there. And so it's a tough spot for them. On the Rams side, I do think, like you said, this theme continues, this reveal. What are we going to see with this Lions secondary? I think we might be overrating the moves that the Lions made in the secondary. Yeah. To be fair,
they did add DJ Reader too. I forgot too. They added DJ Reader, which is stupid because they were so good against the run already.
Yeah, absolutely. That feels just like a lateral move for me. Like how much better could you be against the run? Actually, we mentioned this last year at some point. Wouldn't it be better for the Lions to be worse against the run so they can hide that secondary a little bit more? But I think Davis is a good player for sure, and he's healthy now. That's one of the concerns you have with Davis. Is he going to stay healthy? We'll see what the rookie comes in. We'll see kind of what that does. We've been up and down on highly drafted rookie cornerbacks of late, and so we'll see which side of that the Lions fall on. But ultimately, if Puka Nacua is healthy and they have Cooper Kupp healthy and they have Matthew Stafford, I think this Rams offense is going to score points. That seems like a fairly fair thing to say. We also look at that Rams offense. What is the backfield going to look like? We continue this question thing. Kyren Williams, the punt returner. Nobody cared about Blake Corum being the kick returner.
What's funny though, this will probably be a game where it's a terrible reveal, right?
Yeah. We're not going to see punt returns in this game. We're going to see a lot of touchdowns.
Well, also, this Lions run defense, we just talked about it, right?
It's good.
And the one thing the Rams, the biggest thing with the Kyren Williams split losing touches was that he didn't catch passes last year.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So we're going into this matchup where Detroit was already like lights out, like one of the best. They were second. They allowed the fewest rushing points for fantasy per game to opposing running backs. They were third in yards per carry allowed to running backs. When these teams played in the playoffs last year, Williams had 14 touches for 70 yards. Like, what if let's just say he gets 16 touches, right? What do we think he's going to do with those 16 touches if he doesn't score a touchdown? He's probably going to be like 65 to 75 yards, right? That's like where we'd put him. So like you need a touchdown from him. And if that's the game we get, people are going to take that even a step further than it probably needs to go, because this is a terrible rushing matchup. And this is an offensive line that has question marks entering the season.
Yeah, absolutely. This team is, I thought Sean McVay should have won Coach of the Year last year because I think people were just underestimating how top heavy and maybe not great this roster is. And now it's without Aaron Donald.
Now there's expectations and people take it the other way. Yeah.
It's not, I don't know. We'll see. There are lots of young players surprise, and maybe that'll work out for them. One more game that I want to talk about here, and that's Texans and Colts. Before we get to that, I do want to mention we have a great sale running this week for week 1. You can subscribe to our weekly subscriptions, the first week of our weekly subscriptions. You can get that for 77% off using promo code WEEK1, WEEKONE. So 1 is spelled out. There's a QR code on the screen if you're watching us live that you can check that out. I'd highly recommend it. You get all of, like I said, Rich's worksheets, writing about every player in all of these games. All of the information that you could need to get ready for this week is available in those worksheets. Make sure you go and check all of those out. All right, let's get to the Texans at the Colts. Texans -3, a 48.5 point total. These teams, I think when you're looking at these teams, what we expect from the Colts, especially with Anthony Richardson, is we expect them to increase the pace, especially of their opponents. And, not like the Texans were a slow paced team last year, particularly, but we're going to see, I think, a lot more pace here. That's great news because of all of these weapons now CJ Stroud has around him with a healthy Nico Collins and a healthy Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs coming into it. You looked at last year, even with, there were injury issues on both teams, but you look at these two games between these teams last year, they combined to score 51 and 42 points. Those 42 points came with Minshew at quarterback the whole game and playing part of the quarterback, I believe, in that 51-point game, if I'm remembering correctly.
The whole second
I think that's
half.
the one.
He played the whole second half.
The whole second half. Yeah. That's the one that Anthony Richardson just ripped apart this Texans defense in 2 quarters and then, left hurt. They had 742 and 666 total yards in those 2 games. Like that, if I'm looking at this game, I'm saying this is a game where we're going to see the Texans maybe run more plays than we would expect for them, just kind of like a baseline level. And for me, that makes me really excited about Stroud, really excited about this passing game and kind of seeing, where we're going from here.
Yeah, Stroud had over 20 fantasy points in both games against them last year. One was kind of a jailbreak game script where early in the season they trailed by a bunch of points and they he stacked some volume like that. But this is a team that just has all the pieces, right? Like we've talked about it all year. So we're going to get like CJ Stroud had the year he had last year behind an offensive line that their most frequent unit was on the field for 20% of the snaps. Nico Collins and Tank Dell only played 34% of the snaps that CJ Stroud played. And they're adding Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs to that. And their line's going to be healthier. So like, how do you not feel good about like the momentum that the Texans have built up? The question is just like, how do the targets now get divvied up? That's one of our early season reveals, right? Like we're looking for it. I think we feel confident that from an archetype stance, Nico Collins is the lead wide receiver here. But, if we don't get like the full out run on a passing volume, like, is there ever a compromise, right? Do we have a thing where these guys cannibalize each other? Because Bobby Sloak is going to run the football more than we want him to. They're at least fantasy gamers. I say we as fantasy gamers. He is going to play a fullback more than we want him to, which means a wide receiver will not be on the field as much as we want that wide receiver on the field. That's just the nature of the system. That is what's going to happen. I'm telling you guys all this in week 1, so we just don't get frustrated when it happens, because it's going to happen.
Just Rich is going straight into his gentle parenting voice here.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to happen. Listen, a fullback's going to play in this offense, and they're going to hand off more than you want them to, despite all the players. Like, it is what it is. Just want to tell you this, but like, I'm excited about the play volume in this game. Like you kind of hint in, like the Colts, they ran no huddle 24% of the time with Anthony Richardson. It was, again, abbreviated sample, but it was 17% with Gardner Minshew. And that's just going to like create more opportunity for the Colts to have like these spike plays, because here's the thing. If you want the Anthony Richardson experience, I believe on a down to down basis is going to be frustrating. It's going to be inconsistent on a drive-to-drive basis. You're going to see the Colts look awesome for a drive and then maybe look like the worst offense in the NFL for maybe 2 or 3 drives, and then have an awesome drive or a big play because Anthony Richardson's that athletic. But we still just have not seen him now deliver consistency as a passer, and it's very, very small sample of college and the pros. He's still he needs a lot of seasoning. And I do think this Houston defense is going to be good this year. I think it's going to be good. And I do think that their edge rushers pose a problem in this matchup for the 2 Colts tackles in this game. Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, I definitely think they're going to get pressure. But the play volume that the Colts are going to have, and the fact that Shane Steichen gets it, that it's just going to create like these scoring environments. The Colts, I think, are going to be a team we regularly look at from like a DFS perspective. And like, those are going to be game stat games. Like we're going to be onslaughting a lot of these games with the Colts. So I'm excited for the points to be scored in this game. I will say though, if you have Anthony Richardson, your quarterback, it's been a lot of what people did like on Twitter, like in the last preseason game. Oh my God, this dude, like, how could you, like, he looks the best quarterback in the world. And then, oh my God, this guy, he's not even gonna get a second contract, even though it's a preseason game. I do think that there's going to be some of that volatility because we just haven't seen the consistency down to down as a passer from him yet at any point of playing football.
Yeah. I mean, the fantasy ride for him is going to have a lot to do with how much he's running and the big plays that he's going to create. And so maybe the Colts are a red zone team for you. If you have Anthony Richardson on your fantasy team, you're not going to watch the Colts game. You're going to wait till they show up on the red zone and hope for the best, because
you can operate the box this year.
Yeah.
The YouTube quad box or whatever it is, you can pick what games you want this year. It used to be a frustrating thing that you could never pick what games.
So I still have not signed up for Sunday Ticket. I meant to a month ago when it was cheaper, and I just forgot. Like I completely forgot. And now they send me an email like every 2 days. Hey, you haven't signed up. My favorite thing about their email campaign though is like there's no discounts involved. It's just, hey, it'd be really cool if you signed up for Sunday Ticket. Like they're not dangling any carrots just trying to get me to sign up for Sunday Ticket. There's nothing that they're trying to do to get me to sign up. It's just a matter of, you signed up last year. Would it be cool if you did this year? Give me a discount. If you give me a discount, I'll sign up today. I meant to sign up when we had a discount a month ago, but unfortunately,
Let me ask
ADHD
you about a
does that
guy
to
in this
people.
game.
Yeah,
Week 1, obviously, rosters are full, right? Like there's no bye
sure.
weeks. You really haven't drafted anyone that's hurt yet.
Say the name. I know who you're saying. Say the
No,
name. Say it.
yeah. So, well, no, Adonai Mitchell was probably
Yeah,
drafted as your wide receiver 5. Wide receiver.
that's the name. Yeah,
We assume Josh Downs isn't going to play in this game at this point of recording this.
yeah.
We'll see if, in the 11th hour, he miraculously heals up. But it looks like he's going to play full-time slot in this game. How cute is too cute of playing him? Like, where's your cutoff?
No, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I can give you a name off the top of my head.
I'll throw
What
a
I
couple
will
just
say,
like as examples. Like if I have these guys, how about Keenan Allen?
yes, but I'm very worried about Keenan Allen.
Okay.
And like, the thing with Mitchell is
How about
that
Jameson
the thing with
Williams?
well, yes, but I mean, like, where are the targets coming for Jameson Williams? Like, both of those guys you're mentioning essentially are in the same situation as Mitchell right now, and we just like the game environment for Mitchell. Like Keenan Allen is obviously a much better player. He's probably
What
the
about
number 2
Jaden
wide
Reed, a
receiver.
guy we talked about earlier?
I don't know.
All right, put you on the spot. I
It's
mean, but I'm just curious. I
oh,
think
it's closer.
a lot of
Yeah,
people that drafted AD Mitchell based on buzz are probably like, oh my goodness, he's getting talked about. Like, because he's going to probably come
yeah,
up in DFS stuff later in the week because he's super
sure,
cheap.
absolutely,
If
absolutely.
it's he's super cheap, so it's like I think when you hear that and people get the buzz, they say, oh my gosh, I gotta put this guy in my starting lineup, right? Like everyone's talking about him, but it is week 1. You probably have him as your wide receiver 5 on your roster, and
Yeah,
it's just like, all right, well, who are you bumping out of your lineup, right? And that's because I think I'll probably get a lot on Sunday, a lot of questions. So I was practicing with you about it. So, but
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, Williams, I feel pretty good about, honestly, because I just don't. I need to see that. I need to see the targets happening for Williams. We've seen a lot of, and I mean, he has Amon Ra there. Obviously, Mitchell has Michael Pittman. The connection between Richardson and Pittman we've not seen that been particularly good. And then Mitchell, like you said, I think we're going to see a lot of Mitchell in this game if Josh Downs doesn't play. Alex Pierce is not a target earner. The tight end situation there is not great. The running backs aren't going to earn Jonathan Taylor is not a target earner either. And so I feel Mitchell versus Williams. I feel better about Mitchell. I think the Keenan Allen one is tricky, and Jaden Reed. I don't know. That's also tricky. But I knew that's the name you were going to ask me. Like I knew
okay.
exactly who you were going to ask me about was AD Mitchell, because the point you're making about him is good. Is that if we think he's going to play full-time snaps in this game, both in the slot, and we'll see what happens with that rotation between him and Pierce on the outside once Downs is back. And we've seen him be good in the preseason. We've seen him make plays in the preseason. We think that Richardson should be able to create big plays in the passing game. Whether or not the throw-to-throw consistency that Michael Pittman needs is there, we expect him to create big plays. We know that Mitchell can do that. I think that Mitchell is one of those guys. He's a guy I thought about for Uncut Gems was
Same.
Mitchell, but I didn't know if he maybe has been talked about so much. Another guy like that, Yosavash, who it looks like Chase is going to play. Chase practiced, and so I thought he had been discussed too much to put in Uncut Gems as well. But he's kind of in that similar situation where we expect him to play full-time snaps. We don't like that game environment as much as we like the Texans and the Colts, but we expect him to play full-time snaps. So we don't know what Chase's role is going to be. And so there are lots of those kind of interesting late preseason buzz guys that might actually find their way in a lineup. So it is an interesting question
Yeah,
for sure.
Yoshibash is going to be one of those guys. I think that you look at those early best ball teams that drafted around 17, round 18, right? Like those teams that's where you're going to want him. You just run into those touchdowns with them, and he just makes your
Yeah.
lineup.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're right, because I think I have like 30 of those teams. again, I am all Bengals bandwagon. I'm driving both the Chase Brown and Yoshivash bandwagon, and I've been driving them for a long time. So don't try to take them from me. Speaking of uncut gems, let's move on. And talk about our uncut gems. I actually don't know what your uncut gem is this week. Who do you got this week? Who's the lower rostered, lower started, somebody that guys that we're not really talking about, that we're not thinking about, that you think might pop up if you're in a deep league, if you have lineup concerns. We think this guy might show up and have a better game than people are expecting. Who's yours for this week?
Well, I'm cheating because it's week 1 and I'm using kind of just like draft capital, but I'm going with Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
Oh,
He's
hold on.
wide receiver in the wide receiver 40s.
Fair enough. All right,
in the
we're
wide
raising
receiver
red
40s.
flags. We're raising red flags, but I'm going to let you finish.
That's fair enough. Again, he's in one of these spots that was probably not drafted as a starter on many rosters.
Yeah.
And I think the week 1 run out for him at home as a home favorite in a spot that I really like Geno Smith in a game where Tyler Lockett they're talking about him not playing, potentially being limited, not playing in total. I mean, being limited. He's going to play, but being limited, and then just the usage change that we're going to see for him. Like, there's just no way he's going to be used in the same criminal capacity that Shane Waldron used him as a rookie, where 35% of his targets were at or behind the line of scrimmage. And we might get a game where Patrick Surtain gets more of DK Metcalf, so it's like he can pick on the ancillary cornerbacks of the Broncos a little bit. So I think I would play Jaxon Smith-Njigba over all those guys we named in the context that we talked about. So I would start him over all those guys. He went behind. I would start him over Christian Kirk, who probably will not get. I guarantee you will not see Christian Kirk lower in consensus ranks than him, but I would play him over him if I had him. I'd probably cut off the line. I'm still playing Deontay Johnson over him. But would you play? Here's a question: Jaxon Smith-Njigba versus guys like Michael Pittman or Stephon Diggs. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 2 this week, or even better. So I'm playing him probably over those guys too.
I don't think I'm playing them over those guys because I do like, the opportunity that he has here is big. I mean, the only part of that Denver defense that you're scared of, who just signed a new contract, is Pat Surtain, but you think that's probably a bigger issue for DK. And so yeah. I'm in on that whole idea. But you also have to wonder, and I also have the Broncos bandwagon. I picked the weirdest bandwagons, but I have the Broncos bandwagon here. But going to Seattle with a defense that I expect to be better under Mike McDonald, who had all the talent last year. The talent was there last year for them to be better than they were, especially in the secondary. I don't know how many points Denver's going to actually score in that game.
That is
and I mean, I think we have hopes for Ryan Grubb that he's going to push the ball down the field, especially. And, that's why you get excited about Jaxon Smith-Njigba. But if they're just up by 25 in the second half, like, how many targets are we getting? So I'm going to like Diggs and Pittman better in that game environment. And so I would start them. But the other guys you mentioned, yeah, I'm fine with that, because I do think this is a great opportunity for him in this matchup against, even if I kind of like the Broncos and I think their defense might be a little underrated, it's still not a great defense. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. In this game though, all of that I just said, my uncut gem actually comes from this game too.
Oh, nice.
And it's Josh Reynolds, who's an actual uncut gem. Thank you very much.
Yeah, he is an uncut gem.
That is a real uncut gem. And again, you're going to play Jaxon Smith-Njigba in real leagues. Like, you're going to play him in 10 and 12 team leagues. If we're talking about Josh Reynolds, either you had the worst draft ever because there aren't even enough injuries for this to be a problem, or you're in a very deep league, which, I'm in a few very deep leagues, that this could be something, you start 5 wide receivers or whatever, that you could get to Josh Reynolds. We've all been wish casting Marvin Mims to be this wide receiver 2 after, Tim Patrick was gone. We've all been really wanting that to be Mims. We've seen no indication that that's the case through, what are we now, a year in a preseason with Marvin Mims into this, that we've seen the indication that he's going to be that guy. Josh Reynolds is going to be on the field a lot, would be my guess for this team, is that we're going to see a lot of Josh Reynolds on the field. It's not a great matchup, but I do expect the Broncos to be trailing. Josh Reynolds is quietly 24th in yards per target among qualified receivers over the last 2 seasons. He was not a target earner in Detroit, but he was playing with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then last year he was playing with Laporta as well. So, I mean, I thought we had to go deep in this section. Obviously, maybe the rules have been changed on me with Uncut Gems with Jaxon Smith-Njigba, but I thought we had to go deep in this section. So if we're going deep, at least Josh Reynolds, I think, is going to be on the field, and I think the Broncos are going to need to throw in the second half. So I'm going to take a shot on him. And, he scored touchdowns in Detroit, that kind of receiver. So I'll take a shot on Josh Reynolds as my Uncut Gem.
No, listen, you're braver. You're braver than I am. No one will accuse you otherwise.
Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
Hey, listen, I pulled up some dudes you had last year too, man. Come on, man.
Yeah, fair enough. There will be some weeks. There will be some weeks where I'd throw in the towel.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's the start of the season, and everyone's roster is full.
And we don't have injuries. Like, thankfully, we didn't have a ton of injuries.
Knock on wood. Yeah, we did well. But I mean, there are some guys that I think that were drafted as starters that you like I said, you open the year up and you're just to kind of look at, like you said, like Keenan Allen was a guy that was probably drafted as a wide receiver 3 in a lot of teams. You're just like,
not by me.
What am I doing with this week 1 with Keenan Allen, right? Like, and the Bears situation in general, even Roma Dunes, like what are we going to do with, are we playing him? Or is he going to be a DFS target? Like, there's going to be we don't know, right? Like
DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
DeAndre Swift. Also, like, that Titans defense might just kind of be good. They've certainly tried to make it good. They did everything they could to make it good. And
that's the beauty of week 1. We're going to see some of these cards actually be revealed, right? Like in some of these spots. And that's what we're looking for to, kind of calibrate as we go on.
Yeah, absolutely. I ended up with Caleb Williams as my quarterback 1 in a 2 quarterback league and then in a auction on Monday night. And so I'm hopeful. I need the Bears.
Well, the rest of the roster is probably loaded though. So
it's fine.
You save some money.
Team league. It's fine.
That's true.
It's
14.
Fine for 14 team league.
And you don't realize, and you do enough bunch of 12s, and then someone sends you that 10 team league, and you're like, "Why is every team so like juiced?" And then you go up then you go the other direction, and you go up to 14. And you're like, "Oh my goodness, do I have Michael Wilson on my roster?" Like,
yeah. Once you get to the 14 and 16s, you start to really realize how thin things can get outside of the top 200.
We were in round 20 in our FFPC draft, and you guys are throwing out names. I'm like, if you guys want either, if like someone feels like they want one of these guys, like by all means, go get him.
We had the second, Rich, myself, and our, Curtis Hirsch, good friend Curtis Hirsch. Who will be writing a Start Sit article on Friday. You should read that. But we're all drafting an FFPC team together over the 20th round. And we're the second to last pick of the draft, and we would need a running back. And I was making a case for Rasheen Ali. That is where we are in the draft process, folks. Can't wait for football. He will be inactive tonight, but we'll see what happens the rest. We'll see what happens the rest of the year. We really appreciate you listening to us. We hope you're with us every week. Like I said, we're going to do this every week at 11:30 Eastern, live on Twitter. Head over and check us out. You can also find us on YouTube. This will be uploaded to YouTube. Head over to YouTube, search Sharp Football. You'll find us there. You can find us in your podcast feed, Sharp Angles. Subscribe to our podcast feed. We'd really appreciate it. You're going to get episodes from Warren Sharp this year. Warren Sharp will be on tomorrow talking about college football and the NFL. So make sure that you subscribe to the feed to get those. Remember, you get over sharpfootballanalysis.com, read all of Rich Hribar's work. His worksheet's part of our fantasy package. You can get our weekly fantasy package. You get that for 77% off for this week using promo code WEEK1 with 1 spelled out, WEEK ONE. Make sure you go and check that out. Or you can get 25% off all of our season-long packages with promo code TAKE25. So lots of things over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Check that out. And like I said, we'll be back to talk with you next week.